Hello everyone, it is the Banter Guy here, and welcome to another review. Um, in this particular, it's not really an episode, but in this particular review, I am going to be reviewing The Matrix. Not the whole series, just the original Matrix. Although I will be doing all three films, but this is, however, just part one. So, The Matrix is a film about how would you tell whether you were in a real world or a dream world? Is basically the entire plot. And this guy, played by Keanu Reeves, named Neo, is trying to find a man named Morpheus, who is the leader of what he thinks is a terrorist organization, but he can answer Neo's question about the Matrix, and so he sinks in a lot of his effort trying to find Morpheus. Now, at this time, Neo is working for a computer company under the name that he calls Thomas A. Anderson, whereas when he is hacking, like he is a hacker out of work, he goes by the alias Neo, and he's quite all over the place at the start of the film. He doesn't really know what to believe, and eventually there comes a point where one day he's late for work, he goes to his cubicle, and he gets a package containing a phone. Now, this phone it gets rung, and Neo picks it up, and it's Morpheus at the other end. Now, Morpheus takes Neo through a set of instructions about how to get out of the building because agents are coming after Neo. Now, agents are essentially they're programs sent from the real world inside the Matrix to isolate people who Morpheus is coming after. They are people in the Matrix who isolate targets of Morpheus's contacts. And now, you may be wondering the obvious question, what is the Matrix? The Matrix is an alternate, simulated reality to trap the human beings of the world. In the real world application, according to Morpheus, it was sometime in the early 21st century, mankind rejoiced and marvelled at our own amazing magnificence as we gave birth to AI, which obviously stands for artificial intelligence. Now, this caused a single consciousness to spawn a whole race of machines, thereby overthrowing the human race. Now, obviously, the human race retaliated with nuclear weapons, or at least that's what I believe happened, and that would explain why the entire planet is a wreck. And so the remaining humans have been forced to take shelter in an underground settlement called Zion, which is far below the Earth's surface, near the core where it's still warm. I didn't really know what to make of this because the core would be a lot hotter than they're making it out to be, but I imagine that the planet's been ravaged enough that the core would only be a certain temperature. I don't know. Anyway, one thing I did forget to mention briefly, but I was just touching on Neo's story, was at the start of the film, the opening is Trinity's voice, and she is the main female character, I guess you'd say, of the films, and she is attempting. I don't know what she's doing. I think she was attempting to contact Neo, but she gets cornered by these officers, and the agents arrive, saying to the police that the orders to wait for the agents were for the protection. And it was really funny because the police officer was like, I think we can handle one little girl, and his whole force just gets obliterated. And there's obviously that amazing scene at the start where Trinity jumps up and there's that freeze frame that seems to last forever, and then she finally kicks him in the sort of shoulder chest area, and he knocks back. I mean, and that seems to be a repeating thing in all the films. It's just Trinity jumping up, kicking him, and he falls over. Anyway, once all that's done, we're back at the story now, and Neo has been contacted by these agents, and they implant some sort of bug thing that burrows its way inside his stomach, and then there's this really weird scene when Neo's in the car with Trinity and a couple of the other members of Morpheus's team, and they remove this bug, and I didn't really know what to make of this because were they bugging Neo in real life, or were they bugging his character in the Matrix, like his avatar? Didn't really understand that, but I mean, nonetheless, it's a great film, and my next point will touch on that. Is Hugo Weaving is in this film. Now, people, I think, will know Hugo Weaving much better in this film for his role. And actually, I think Hugo Weaving's role in The Matrix played a much bigger role than Neo's, or Keanu Reeves in this film, because Keanu Reeves was Neo, who's the main character, but the main antagonist was Hugo Weaving. And it's really hilarious because he has that really subtle tone because everything that he says is so subtly pointed out. And I'll just give you one of the lines that he says to Neo when he's interrogating him. As you can see, we've had our eye on you for some time now, Mr. Anderson. Now, it seems you've been living two lives. In one life, you are Thomas A. Anderson, a computer chip programmer for a respected computer programming company. And the other life has been lived in computers, where you go by the alias Neo and are guilty of virtually every computer crime we have a law for. One of these lives has a future, the other does not. And it's just, there's that sort of sense of, yeah, you know, that sort of feeling you get when you're intimidated. That's the feeling you get whenever he starts speaking. And in the Matrix Reloaded, the second film, it's even more hysterical because it's his lines are even more terrifying. I'll go into greater detail on that when I do my Matrix Reloaded review. But yeah, so once Neo is he's in this room with Morpheus, and there's that characterization scene pretty much the entire film, which is the choice. And that's one thing I didn't really get was, it seems in every single Matrix film it was choice. That was it, just the whole thing is choice, everything is choice. And it, whatever. But it's just, he has that sort of scene talking about Alice falling down the rabbit hole. And so he offers Neo a choice. He can either take the blue pill or the red pill. If he takes the blue pill, he goes unconscious and he wakes up in his bed and believes whatever he wants to believe. But if he takes the red pill, Morpheus can reveal the truth to Neo finally and wake him up out of the Matrix. Obviously Neo takes the red pill because he was curious and he didn't want to come all this way and then fall so short of what he was after. Once Morpheus explained the truth to Neo, Neo is just like, let me out! I don't like this, let me out! And so, then he sort of throws up a wee bit, and it's a wee bit of a disgusting scene, but, yeah. That's what happens in that respect. And then, the reason that all the characters that are freed up from the Matrix, in other words, their minds have been freed, the reason they're so good at fighting is because they have programs for combat, and so they get trained how to do jujitsu and judo. And there's this great scene when Neo wakes up after about 8 hours or something, after being bombarded with all this combat knowledge, and finally he says, "I know kung fu," and then Morpheus is like, "Show me," and it's quite a tense scene when they're in the sparring program, as Morpheus calls it, where they're doing some combat, and then one of the members of the hovercraft ship of Morpheus, which is the Nebuchadnezzar, because all the human beings really have at this point are of some very selective technology, but they have hovercrafts. And Morpheus is called the Nebuchadnezzar, and his crew is only like 10 people. And one of them's called Mouse, and he's like the sort of young one. And it's quite funny because when Morpheus starts fighting Neo, he runs downstairs to the sort of the mess hall, and he says to everyone else, "Morpheus is fighting Neo," and then everyone's like jumping over the benches and that to get upstairs and view it. Sorry, guys. And then it's kind of from there you don't really know what to make of it because Neo's supposed to be the one. He's supposed to be the guy who's going to end the war, free the minds of everyone in the Matrix. But the story sort of loses focus because then what happens is Neo is taken in to consult with the Oracle, who's this person who can see the future and know everything, and she knows most of the future. She doesn't know it all. And then there's that point where Morpheus is introducing, or they're in the elevator, and Neo says, "And she's never wrong." And then Morpheus says, "Try not to think of it in terms of right and wrong. She is a guide. She can show you the path," and all that sort of crap. I mean, to be honest, the number of times they were talking about "she can show you the path" and all that rubbish, just I don't care about this. Which, I mean, it's not a great way to think about it, but yeah. Anyway, one of their members of their team, called Cypher, is a complete and utter douche bag. He is the epitome of a prick, I think. I mean, anyone else has a different opinion, comment below. I'd love to hear that opinion. But basically, he tricks Tank into finding him an exit for the Matrix, and yeah, that's how they get out. They have these exits, which are an old-fashioned phone that starts ringing. You pick it up, and you get zapped inside. You get zapped out of the Matrix and into the real life. And Cypher, he electrocutes with one of their weird taser guns. I don't know what those things are. They're a gun that fires a bolt of electricity. And he takes out Tank, who was the operator, because when you're inside the Matrix, to have any sense of know what's going on, the operator has like a bunch of screens with the Matrix code on it, and they can see what you're doing inside the Matrix, so you're safe, ish. I say safe-ish because like 4 people die in the space of like a few minutes because the operator was just going, "What is that? What is that? I can't see anything because I'm a freaking moron." Anyway. Yeah, so Morpheus gets captured by Agent Smith, obviously played by Hugo Weaving, and then there's this sort of scene where Smith is going, "The great Morpheus, we meet at last," and they have a bit of a fight, and there's this kind of funny scene when Morpheus is on top of Smith, and that sounds wrong. That sounds very wrong. He's on top of him, but yeah, there's that scene, and then what happens is they have this sort of wee back and forth, and Morpheus says, "Who are you?" And then he says, "Smith, Agent Smith," and then Morpheus is like, "You all look the same to me." I thought that was quite hilarious. I don't know what it is about that specific point, but I thought that was quite funny. And then once Morpheus is captured, Neo decides to go on this insane idea of going into the Matrix, getting through this military base, and then getting past 3 agents to rescue Morpheus. Because if they didn't, every single captain of a ship, be it Morpheus and all the other captains of the ships of Zion, get given keys, like key code or codes to the Zion's mainframe, and Zion's mainframe is like some sort of big computer that looks after all of Zion's operations and basically keeps them alive. And so there was a point where they were about to execute Morpheus because he had the codes, and the agents were trying to break into his mind, and then Morpheus would tell them the codes, they would get into the mainframe and wipe out Zion. So there was a moment when they were about to kill Morpheus, and Trinity and Neo are both against it. Then Neo comes up with this idea to go into the Matrix to save Morpheus. So once that's all done well, they load up one of the programs to get a whole load of guns, and then they go into this place, and there's this epic scene where Neo puts his bag in the metal detector, walks through the metal detector, and it goes off with the highest level, and then the guy says, "So would you please remove any metallic items, belts, buckles, watches, wristbands, and like that sort of stuff," and then he just opens his coat, and there's like a whole load of guns on the coat and on him, and the guy says, "Holy shit!" and then just gets whoosh, and Neo whacks him back, and it was hilarious. I thought that was pretty good. Yeah, and then once they've had the big shootout with the military forces, they get to the top of this building, and then they have another fight with one of the agents, and then Neo acts like an agent in the sense that he dodges a couple of bullets, but he still gets shot. And then Trinity's like, "I've never seen anyone move that fast." One of my, just before I continue with the review, one of my problems with The Matrix, nobody has any emotions, and it gets on my nerves, because everyone just has that deep tone to their voice, that absolutely lifeless tone. It sounds quite Scottish. No, but you just see my point. They have no character inside their voice, and so you find it incredibly difficult to care about these people, which brings the movie down immensely. I mean, if the characters had had some recognition because of their tone, because of their character development, which, by the way, there is none, there is no character development, it would have made the film so much better. That's all I'm trying to say. Anyway, continuing with the review, after that's all well and done, they go back to, or they're trying to escape, and then Neo has this big fight out with Hugo Weaving, and it's all well and good. And then there's this long chase scene afterwards, after Neo's escaped, and then the Sentinels try to break into Morpheus' ship, and Sentinels are basically, they look like octopuses that can fly, and I've never figured that out. How do they fly? How do they fly? Anyone? Because I've never seen a jetpack, never seen any sort of heat residue from a hover, from like a big hover blade or something, so how are they flying? I don't know. Just because. Because they're 90% helium, even though they're completely metal. Anyway. Sorry, I get quite angry when it comes to that, because it ruins the film for me, because if you don't understand why they can fly. Anyway. The end of the film pretty much details Neo becoming the One, seeing the Matrix, and then being able to take on the agents and stop bullets. Literally putting his hand out as if there's an invisible wall, stopping the bullets, then he can just let them fall, and then Hugo Weaving, or Agent Smith, gets destroyed by Neo, in terms of both physically and then literally physically, which is when Neo somehow zaps inside him and explodes him from the inside. Again, no idea how that works. Anyway, yeah, and so now onto the proper review. What did I think of the film? Well, I enjoyed it, other than the fact that there was no character development. Neo, his tone, even when after he realises, aside from him being slightly sick, which, believe me, I would be, if I just found out that my entire life was a lie, I would have been a bit more pissed than that, in terms of the vomiting. I would have probably wanted to kill everyone on that ship for this insane lie that's in front of me. And so that really pissed me off. Secondly, the fact that some of the photography, or the trick photography, now, granted, this was trying something new. This whole idea of trick photography and mid-air stunts, that was all new, granted. But the physics in this film are terrible. I mean, I'll give you an example. One of them, which was when Neo and Smith are jumping at each other. They jump each other in a straight line, a perfectly horizontal line. Now, gravity would imply that they would fall slightly before they would clash at each other. But oh no, apparently the momentum of just their legs can propel them 8 meters away from each other, getting close to each other without falling at all. That pissed me off. And so, I don't like the physics. I don't like the physics. I don't like the fact there's no character development. And I really, really hate the fact that nobody, absolutely nobody, ever thought it would be a good idea to have an emergency exit from their building. So when apparently the windows get bricked up somehow, I don't know. I mean, they say that this deja vu thing with a black cat is an incline that they've changed something, but that's not a simulator. That's cheating. I mean, rage, so much rage. Anyway, I'm gonna have to give it a verdict now before I completely go insane and fly off the wall. But the final verdict for The Matrix, the original Matrix, is a solid 6 out of 10. Now, the reason I give it a 6 out of 10, primarily, other than anything else, is that there was, first of all, no character development at all. There was absolutely no emotion change. It was pretty much one tone throughout the entire film. Thirdly, the acting from both Neo and Morpheus was totally not human. It was as if Morpheus was like God telling... I don't know, it was just... There was no change in emotion. There was no underlying point to Morpheus exchanging points with Neo about the Matrix. That was completely pointless. And then the completely non-existent physics of the Matrix. That really got me. Because it's supposed to be a perfect simulator of real life. And if it's a perfect simulator, the laws of gravity would be implied, I would hope. Anyway, so yeah, final verdict for The Matrix is a 6 out of 10. I've been the Banter Guy, and I'll see you guys later. Like, comment, and subscribe for more reviews from me. Bye-bye.